So one of the things I love about this song is, to me, it's like, for people who aren't expert at jazz, that opening melody is the dumbest, simplest couple of notes you could possibly play, right? It's in C and it's dun, 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 dun.
But the
But
note is G.
but then you've got it. I guess the lesson is you can start off with something that simple and go from there into what he just did. And that kind of is the history of jazz almost, right
Right.
there.
Well, and that's a big part of Duke Ellington's composing style, is that it ain't got, if it ain't got that swing, it don't mean a thing, right? It's that he's setting you up for what's going to come on your improvisation. And that might be the simplest thing, but that rhythm cadence is what's setting the whole thing up. It's a rhythm thing.
Right. Yeah. And I was just thinking too, like, it's okay. Sometimes people say, oh, he plays like a metronome, as that's a negative thing because it's too mechanical. It's okay to play like a metronome if you're swinging.
Right. Yeah, people would say that about the great Jamaican drummer Sly Dunbar, that it's just too perfect and you might as well get a drum machine to do it. And it's like, no, it's not. No, that's a human being playing with that deadliest of time feels. That's a miracle. That's something to be admired. The machine could never do that.
Right. Another just thing you had mentioned before, that Oscar Peterson is kind of on an island of his own. He's this kind of thing. Are you also talking about in terms of, you've talked about the family and the connectedness of all these different musicians geographically, even at times, right?
Yep, him being Canadian is one thing for sure, and then, but I think all the musicians who played jazz, including the white musicians, all had a common bond in that it was still a segregated time, and it was still segregated not just in terms of going, using the back door at the club, not being able to eat at the restaurant, having to sleep over at people's houses because you can't get good accommodations for a hotel room while you're on tour. Really basic amenities that are, and if a band is mixed, then the white guy gets to stay in the good hotel and the black guys have to go to the crummier part of town and stay in a crummier place. And so then the white guy's going to choose to fraternize with his homeboys and stay there. This is a totally, people don't often like to talk about it because it's such a painful legacy of the past, but it's really a part of the music. So I think with Oscar, him being, one of the giants of giants, I'm sure that there was a lot of fraternity with anybody who played that music, called jazz or whatever. So when I say he's on his own island, I mean more that his actual piano playing, his actual music playing, he's not really like a legendary composer. I would challenge you to sing one of his songs. I'm sure he's got several hundred fantastic compositions, but I don't know if anybody really knows any of them. I mean, he's got some records that are conceptually his music, but his piano playing is so diverse. He can play this furious, full 10-finger style that I would even say Art Tatum doesn't do. It seems unique to Oscar. It's a very full. And when you look at transcriptions of it and try to wrangle with it and play it yourself, it's just laughable. It's inhuman. It's so fantastic, so dense and complex. He can do all the stride stuff. He can boogie woogie left hand like unbelievable. It's like these two people. Is flawless in the left hand what he's doing, and then the right hand's doing something even more complicated. This is incredible that he can play all the bebop stuff, he can play the block chord stuff, and then he can go ahead and do a sermon like classical stuff.
Yeah,
and total recall, absolute pitch, probably photographic memory. I bet you he could like Brahms or something. He could probably transpose whole swaths of music up a half step just if you needed him to. It's like superhuman.
wow. Well, like you said, one of the giants. Well, that brings us to your next cut by a guy named Hampton Hawes. And I have to admit, I was not as familiar with Hampton as I was with all these other names we've had on this list. And for me, when I first heard this, he was a revelation. I was like, wow, this guy is
Yeah.
a true virtuoso. And then, of course, I had to, you know, then quickly search out and read a little Wikipedia entry about his life and what an interesting guy he was. And so this is really exciting for me to hear this.
Yeah, so he represents he's from LA, and so he's an LA guy that represents a different sound from the New York guys. And his trio playing, he's kind of like Ahmad Jamal in that he's playing these like arrangements. It sounds very improvised and off the cuff, but when you go into the weeds with him, one chorus is fairly similar to the next on a lot of songs. And but the blues, once again, he's got this gospel feel up in his playing, but it's slightly different than Wynton Kelly's. And I don't know if that's a West Coast thing. I got turned on to him because he was a great hero of Charlie Hayden, one of my favorite bass players. And so you wouldn't think Hampton Hawes to Ornette Coleman. It doesn't seem like a natural fit. But then they were all out in LA for a long time together. And so, dealing with the prejudice of the LA police at the time was something that was going to definitely make everybody bond. And Dexter's from LA, so Hampton Hawes and Dexter are tight. Hampton Hawes got cut a little short for getting in trouble for drugs and doing time in the slammer.
Well, I've got just to talk about that for a minute. There's an incredible story here about how he was in jail and was watching John F. Kennedy on TV, and he became convinced that if he could reach John F. Kennedy somehow, that he would get pardoned. And sure enough, he did.
That's amazing. Really? I didn't hear that. That's fantastic. So I was, when I was getting deeper into Hampton Hawes, actually, I think it was like last year. I mean, I was already hip to him, but I wasn't hip to his whole catalog. And I got his whole catalog from a friend of mine who's very generous at sharing music. And I wrote back to him after listening to some and tearing some of it apart. I was so moved. I was just rocked out on it. And I was like, this guy's as bad as Tatum and Bud Powell. This is the man. And when I said it to my friend, he was like, really? You think Hampton Hawes? Like, he was like distrustful, or like I was being overly, enthusiastic about somebody who didn't earn such a hallowed title. I disagree. When you go into the weeds on it for yourself and play it with him, then I challenge you. It's fantastic.
All right. Well, let's hear the sometimes underrated and underappreciated Hampton Hawes playing Lover, Come Back to Me.